Welcome back, listeners, to Midnight Pasta. Tonight, I've got something deeply unsettling for you. A true horror story that began with a missing pet and ended with a nightmare no one saw coming. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Shadow had always been more than just a pet. He was family. A black lab with a broad chest, soulful brown eyes, and a bark that could make the UPS guy jump 3 feet. Loyal to a fault, protective without being aggressive. The kind of dog people said had an old soul, the sort that picked up on moods, sat beside you when you cried, and padded softly through the house like he understood when to make himself scarce. He'd been with the Clark family for nearly 8 years, watched the kids grow up, slept on their feet when they had nightmares, guarded the backyard like it was his kingdom. Which is why it hit so hard when he disappeared. It happened on a Sunday night. Rain coming down in thick sheets, thunder rolling in steady waves over the hills, the kind of storm that made the windows rattle and the porch light flicker. Shadow wasn't scared of storms, but something about that night had him on edge. He kept pacing between the back door and the living room window, tail low, ears twitching like he could hear something the family couldn't. Then, just before 9 p.m., a gust of wind slammed the backyard gate open, one loud crack, and Shadow bolted. Not barking, not growling, just gone, vanished into the dark. They called for him, for hours, drove up and down the block, soaking wet, yelling his name until their voices were raw, but there was no sign of him. Not a bark in the distance, no flash of eyes in the headlights. He was gone. For weeks they searched, flyers, shelters, even a Facebook post that got shared over 100 times. The vet said someone probably took him in. The animal control guy suggested coyotes, but the family didn't believe either. Shadow was smart. He knew the area, and he would have come home if he could. Eventually reality set in. They held a little backyard memorial and buried his favorite toy under the oak tree. The kids cried, the dad didn't say much, and the mom, quietly, boxed up his leash and food bowl and tucked him away in the garage. Months passed. The grass grew, seasons changed, and then, almost a year later to the day, Shadow came back. It was early morning. The sun had barely crested the ridge, casting that pale, watery light that makes everything look washed out and still. Carol was making coffee when she noticed something at the door. She froze. Shadow stood on the porch, staring through the glass. Same black coat, still glossy despite the weather. Same tall, proud posture. Same eyes. Only they weren't quite the same. They looked darker, not just in color, but in depth. Like there was too much shadow behind them, too much weight. In his face, his expression was blank. No tail wag, no excited pawing, just stillness. The rest of the family came rushing down the stairs when she called out. The daughter, Emily, burst into tears and flung the door open. My son Ben started dancing with joy. His buddy is back. Shadow didn't bark, didn't run up. He walked in, calm, silent, and sat down in the center of the room like he'd never left. They were stunned, but grateful. Who wouldn't be? A year gone and he'd found his way back? They assumed someone had taken care of him. Maybe he escaped. Maybe he'd followed some distant scent trail all the way home. But something about him was different. It started small. He didn't bark anymore, not at people, not at the mailman, not even when a raccoon dragged an entire garbage bag across the driveway. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't play. He ate, slept, sat, but always silently, always watching. And he never blinked. Carol noticed first. She'd sit on the couch, reading, and feel him staring, unmoving, eyes fixed on her face. If she looked away and looked back, he'd be in the exact same position. Even when the lights dimmed, even when hours passed, she joked about it to her husband, said Shadow was probably just getting old, or maybe the year on the run had changed him. Then, the cat died. Whiskers was old, 17, blind in one eye, but healthy, still jumped up on the windowsills, still purred like a motor. Carol found him curled up in the laundry room. No blood, no signs of trauma, just lying there, eyes wide open, frozen, like he'd seen something just before the end. 2 days later, the parakeet was found crushed inside its cage, door still latched, blood splattered up the bars. Looked like something had pressed down on it from above. Carol found Shadow that morning sitting in front of the cage, just sitting, staring. He didn't move when she entered, didn't even glance her way, just stared at the wall behind the cage. Then the dream started. Carl was the first. She'd wake up paralyzed, unable to speak, eyes wide open. And there he'd be, Shadow at the foot of her bed, staring up at her, growling low and deep, but his mouth never moved. And his shadow on the wall behind him, it would shift, it moved, but Shadow didn't. The family moved Shadow's bed to the back porch after the night the power went out. It was the only thing they could agree on. They didn't say it out loud, not really, but something passed between them in the silence. A look, a nod. No one wanted that dog sleeping in the house anymore. He didn't resist, didn't whine, didn't paw at the door, just sat there on the porch, staring, watching the windows, even after they shut the curtains. The next few days were quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that tightens in your chest. No more sleep paralysis, no more scratching sounds. Shadow pacing the halls in the dark. But it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause. Ben was still the most shaken. He didn't talk anymore, just carried that same drawing in his pocket, the one with the tall, red-minded man inside the dog. He'd unfold it sometimes and stare at it, like he was waiting for something to change. One afternoon, the mother found a new drawing under Ben's pillow. It was the same man, but this time, he wasn't just inside the dog, he was stepping out of it, and the dog was on fire. The mother didn't sleep that night. Neither did her husband. They kept the lights on, sat in the living room in silence, listening. Around 3 a.m., they heard the porch creak. They didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. It creaked again, slower, heavier, like something testing its weight. Then a sound that didn't make sense. Breathing. Not a dog's panting, not animal sounds. Human breathing, slow, labored, like someone standing right outside the window, watching. The father got up. He moved slowly to the curtain and peeked out. Just a crack. Shadow was still lying on the porch, but something was wrong. He was floating, maybe a few inches off the ground, rigid, still. But his shadow was still on the porch floor, lying down. And then it moved. The shadow sat up, while the dog stayed motionless in the air. The next morning, the mother packed a bag, told the kids they were going to stay at their aunt's for a few days, just a short trip, a break. But when they opened the car door, Shadow was already inside, lying across the back seat, still, silent, looking straight ahead, not at them. The car keys didn't work. The dashboard was dead. No clicks, no lights, not even the dome light. Ben started screaming. He pointed at the window, and for the first time in days, he spoke. "He's in the glass." They didn't try to leave again. Instead, they called a priest. He wasn't local. No one in town would come. But the father found a name online, someone who dealt with cases like this. He arrived 3 days later. Tall man, white collar, hollow eyes. Said very little. Walked through the house, silent as a ghost, stopped at the porch, stared at Shadow. Then said one word, "This is not a dog." They didn't argue. He asked to see Ben's drawings, spent nearly an hour flipping through them. Some were just scribbles, but others looked like warnings, red eyes behind mirrors, teeth in the walls, a long black shape dripping from the ceiling. And always the man inside the dog. The priest made a quiet phone call in the kitchen. spoke in a language none of them understood. Then he turned to the family and said, "Tonight you leave. Take nothing. Do not say his name. Do not look into the glass. And do not speak to it if it speaks to you." They didn't ask questions, just waited for nightfall. But Ben wasn't waiting. He was already packing, fast, focused. The daughter Ellie asked him softly if he was scared. He looked at her, eyes wide, trembling. "I'm not scared of him," he whispered. "I'm scared he's not done yet." The family tried to leave. Suitcases packed, car loaded. But when the father turned the key in the ignition, nothing. Not a click, not a hum. The lights inside the house flickered, even though the power was still off. And in the back seat, Shadow was already waiting. No one had seen him get in. They all stood there in the driveway, not speaking, not breathing, until the mother turned and said, "We'll go in the morning." At 11:47 p.m., the power flickered. The priest moved quickly, marked the windows, lit thick candles, spoke softly into the flames. Outside, the wind picked up, but the air was still, too still, like the world had stopped breathing. Then the front door creaked open. On its own, Shadow walked in. No sound, no paw steps, just presence. He moved like he wasn't moving, like the floor bent to let him glide. He walked past them all, straight to Ben, stopped, tilted his head. Ben stood still, shoulders shaking, but he didn't look away. "Ben," the priest said softly, "come to me." But Ben didn't move. Shadow opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Just something else, a shape. Like smoke, but too dark. Like liquid, but floating. Slithering from his jaws and into the air. It spoke, but not in words. A voice in the head, deep, broken, like bones grinding together underwater. The lights exploded. The priest screamed, "Cover the mirrors!" But it was too late. Ben turned, too fast, and locked eyes with the bathroom mirror down the hall. And then, he vanished. Just gone. No sound, no flash, just an empty floor, a faint smell of sulfur. And Shadow? He was gone too. They searched the house, tore up the floorboards, opened every door, every cabinet. Nothing. Ben was just gone. No one slept that night. The priest stayed until sunrise. Then he too left, without a word. They never found Ben. No signs of forced entry, no clues. The official report lists him as a missing child. But his mother swears he's still in the house. Not in the walls, not under the floor. She says he's in the mirrors. Sometimes she sees a flash of red in the corner of the glass. Sometimes she hears scratching when the windows fog. And sometimes, just sometimes, she hears her son whisper from the reflection, "Don't say his name." Weeks passed. They didn't talk about Ben, not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't. The mother couldn't say his name without crying. The father wouldn't sleep in his own bed anymore. He just sat in the hallway outside Ellie's door, night after night, shotgun across his lap. Ellie kept drawing the same picture over and over, Ben standing in the hallway, except his eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. One night, the mother tried to leave. She packed a bag, scooped Ellie into the car, and drove. But the road wasn't there. Not washed out, not blocked by trees, just gone. The asphalt faded into weeds, then dirt, then nothing. Like the world just ended beyond the driveway. She didn't try again. After that, the father started covering every reflective surfaces. Mirrors, windows. Even the toaster said he saw things in them. Shadows moving behind his own reflection. And one night, just before midnight, he swore he saw Ben standing behind him, smiling. But the smile was wrong, too wide, too sharp, and the eyes weren't his. They burned red, like the ones in Ben's drawings. Ellie was the first to say it. "This isn't our house anymore." She didn't mean they'd moved, she meant the house itself had changed. The walls seemed deeper. The hallway stretched longer at night. The doorknobs felt colder, even when the heat was on. One night, she heard scratching under her bed. When she looked, it wasn't a rat. It wasn't shadow. It was her own reflection, staring up at her from the hardwood floor. But her real face wasn't making that expression. The priest wouldn't return their calls. Every number they dialed rang once, then silence. The mother drove to the church he came from, 5 towns over, but it had burned down. 3 days after his visit, no cause determined. No bodies found, just one thing left behind, a single half-burned page from a child's notebook, a drawing of a dog and a man standing inside it. That night, Ellie saw Ben again. Not in a dream, not in the mirrors, outside. He was standing in the backyard, barefoot in the snow, not moving, not blinking, just watching. She called for her mom, her dad, but by the time they got to the window, he was gone. Only footprints in the snow remained, but they didn't lead away. They led toward the house. The father put nails in every window. He wasn't trying to keep something out. He was trying to keep them from opening themselves, because they did sometimes. At night, always the same one. Ben's old bedroom window. Always around 3:13 a.m. Once the mother stood outside his door and watched it happen. The window creaked open, and something crawled through. Not Ben, not shadow, just a shape. Long and thin, with too many joints. It folded in on itself as it moved, like it was being born over and over again. It slithered across the ceiling and vanished into the attic. They didn't go up there anymore. They locked the attic hatch and sealed it with salt, but the hatch would be open every morning, no matter what they did, and the salt, gone, licked clean. One night, the mother found a new drawing. Not in Ben's room, not under a pillow, in the mirror, scratched into the fogged-up glass. The same red-eyed figure, only this time it wasn't inside a dog, it was inside her. The words beneath it read, "It's my turn now." The mother no longer looked in mirrors, not because of fear, because every time she did, she saw herself smiling, even when she wasn't. And her reflection? It winked at her once. She smashed every mirror in the house after that. But that night, the shards rearranged themselves on the floor into a face. Ben's face. Ellie stopped sleeping. She claimed there was someone under her bed again, only now it whispered to her. It said things in her brother's voice, but not like he used to speak. Low, raspy, wrong, and it asked questions no child should know to ask. What did Dad do before he met Mom? Why does Mom lock her phone? Who's the man who visits when Daddy's gone? It wasn't her brother. It was something pretending to be him, something that fed on secrets, lies, shame. And when they tried to comfort her, Ellie only whispered, "You shouldn't lie to it." The father tried to burn the dog collar, Shadow's old one, still hanging by the door. He doused it in lighter fluid, lit the match, but it didn't burn. Instead, the flame froze, hovered in the air, crackling, blue and cold. And when it flickered out, he heard it. A growl, not from behind him, not from the hallway, from inside his own chest, like something was watching through his ribs. Then came the knock. 3 a.m, 3 soft knocks on the front door. No footsteps on the porch, no shadow under the frame, just the knocks. Tap, tap, tap. He looked through the peephole. Ban, or something wearing Ban's skin. Too tall, neck slightly too long, eyes burning like coals. "Daddy," it whispered, "can I come home now?" He didn't answer. He just turned off the light. But in the silence, he heard a second voice. Behind him, the same whisper, only this time, "I already am." The next morning, the family was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood. No packed bags, Just breakfast on the table gone cold, and the back door wide open. The police didn't find anything, except one thing scratched into the inside of the mirror above the mantel. They looked too long. They say the house is still there, empty, cold, but every once in a while, someone swears they see a black dog in the window, just sitting, watching, and if you get too close, if you glance at the glass for just a second too long, you'll see it too. Not the dog welcomes it. It's behind it, something older than grief, older than darkness, something that wears us to walk among us. And if it ever knocks on your door, don't answer it, because once you look into its eyes, it already knows your name. If this story chilled you tonight, make sure you subscribe to Midnight Pasta for more true horror tales just like this. And remember, not every pet that comes home is still your pet.